Hello, my name is Anna Imagination of the Healing Garden. I have been on a massive journey for the last 40 years of my life. It actually started in 1995 when I looked around my situation and I said, well, this fucking sucks. And I wanted to change it. And I realized that all of the people in my life, all of my abusers, had one thing in common: they were stupid. And I thought, well, if I just study the subconscious mind and become smarter than them, then I can get out of my situation. So I dedicated myself to finding two questions, the answers to two questions. The first one is there a God? I wanted to be able to prove it. And the second question is, what is the cure to mental illness? So on a hunch, I started studying philosophy. It was very shortly after philosophy that I found my way into psychology, compliments of Carl Jung. In fact, it was right around the time that I approached the 18th century the 19th century, because at that point I had studied everything from Socratic method and Plato all the way up to the 19th century, that I found Carl Jung and his work on theology, and I went, so the Healing Garden is an accumulation of all of my work. It is a compilation of everything I've ever studied, crammed into one business. And I became unemployed and left the patriarchy in 2022, August of 2022, when I just said, I quit the patriarchy because the patriarchy is not authentic to me. It has absolutely nothing to do with my identity. Which brings me to episode 1 of the Subconscious Dialogues. I recently hypothesized that my life work could be condensed down into a simple concept. And I started building the Healing Garden to try and simplify this magnitude of work that I've been putting together since 1995. And I'm there and I've got my theories and I'm throwing everything out into the world. And then I realized, wow, this is really disorganized. But then I further realized that it's way too complicated. And I want to talk to teenagers. I want to talk to the working class. I want to talk to everybody. And that's when I realized that not only was I a master of communication because I'm a published author, but also because my first and foremost passion, love, and commitment in my life was to theater, specifically to story. And when I stepped into the world of theater, I was 4 years old, but it wasn't just theater, it was music, it was dance. I passionately encompassed theater and the arts. So much so that my family did not approve because of their patriarchal beliefs. And what ensued from 4 years old and on was an existence where, at the expense of my identity, I had to live and conform to the patriarchy. And it wasn't a little shift, it was my entire existence. One day I will. One day. My identity was taken away from me. And when I began my pursuit of knowledge in 1995, it took me a very long time to realize that the core problem to my mental illness, to all of our mental illness, was simply a removal of the identity from the self. That's it. That's my thesis in a nutshell. It is literally a removal of the identity from the self. We are not talking about light work here. We are not talking about simple concepts. So it made me ask the question, what exactly is the identity? And how does it relate to the self? And what happens to the subconscious mind when you rip apart the identity? Now, I have a podcast called Shifting Perspectives, where I delve into the hows, the whys, and all the theory behind my work. So if you are a psychologist, I strongly recommend that you take a look at Shifting Perspectives. By the way, it is the 4th of July. So, and we also have a thunderstorm here. It's really interesting because we have my neighbors are setting off fireworks in Brooklyn. And then we have this massive storm moving in. So I'm getting thunder rolls and fireworks all at the same time. And it's a super moon. So my energy is just, which is why I'm on a stage. So if you are a psychologist, if you're an intellect, if you are a hobbyist in the field of philosophy or psychology, I strongly recommend taking a look at Shifting Perspectives. However, I realize that when I talk psych, I'm at a professional level and I'm communicating constantly with doctors and with other psychologists, philosophers, a lot of intellects. And I realized that the way they talk is not the same way that my 15-year-old daughter with ADHD talks. And that's a problem. Now, I love conversing with my coworkers and my colleagues, but I really want to talk to the 15-year-old with ADHD. And I realized, because my goal isn't, when you choose a field of study, this is what they don't tell you in school. When you choose a field of study, you have many options to choose from. And one of the first things you can choose from is, okay, I want to choose a subject. Once you choose the subject, you can do many things with that subject. You can work with the public. You can work with students and the youth. You can work with corporations. You can take it to business levels and implement a program that it takes X and it plugs it into a company of your choice. And poof, look at that. You are helping businesses grow. Or you can take it to academia, where you are in a college and you're teaching people your field. Or, my favorite, you can enter the research department, where you take all of that knowledge and you advance it to the next level. That is my happy place. I don't want to just learn psychology and then sit in a little office being dictated exactly what I have to say by a massive corporation called the insurance company that has no business being in therapy to begin with, and yet they are. So I decided that route was not for me, but I still love psychology. I thought about teaching it in schools and colleges, but it's not available in schools, and it should be, and it's not available in colleges, not the way I do it. And they're just taught to regurgitate the same garbage that the government told them to say. The thing is, psychology is a philosophy, first and foremost. Psychology is a branch of thinking. It's an opinion. It's abstract. It doesn't really exist. So you can argue all you want about how I'm wrong and you're right, or professionals are right and I'm wrong, or vice versa. At the end of the day, right and wrong is a debate for ethics. And I don't want that, because psychology is really a philosophy. It's an opinion, because we can't measure this. So I came up with some really awesome concepts, thoughts and ideas, roles for my subconscious mind. And when I put it in this imaginary play fiction realm, a theatrical stage, I realized that I did too. I realized that I was able to break down a very complex philosophy and present it to almost anybody because it was in stage format. In addition to that, I was also tapping into my identity and reviving a massive part of who I am and who I was that was taken away from me. So I went, wow, this really benefits twofold. First, it teaches me how to revive the most cherished, beautiful part of me that I had taken away. The very first death of my identity, and we all have our first deaths, but mine was theater and stage. I wanted to be an actress. And all that they succeeded in doing was moving me to the audience. They never could quite wipe out my passion and love for theater. And I paid heavily for that dream because my identity was taken away from myself. So healing is really a journey into the subconscious mind to take back your identity for yourself. That's really what we're doing here. And for me, that's going to be the stage. I cannot be an actress. Every time I memorized lines, I thought I would have written it differently. I was one of those actresses that would have been like waiting tables going, I'm an actress, but what I really want to do is direct and write and produce and own the stage. Now, that's me. Oh, that's me. If I had my way, if I lived in my ideal world, if my trauma did not happen to me, I would not be a psychologist. If my trauma did not happen to me, write those words down. If my trauma did not happen to me, who would I be? I'm going to write it down too. I'm going to join you on this exercise. If my trauma did not happen to me, I love this question because this question really makes you think back to what would I look like if I hadn't been abused, beaten, traumatized, and all the other garbage that goes along with it. So, thank you. It is raining, and that is the universe saying, you need the energy, Anna, so we're going to give you more rain. And I am thinking, thank you. I need the rain right now because I really need my energy to be fueled. If my trauma did not happen to me, who would I be? I will tell you who I would be. I would be an actress. That's it. I would just be an actress. I would be an actress who would be pursuing theater, and I would just be some celebrity actress in Hollywood, or I would be on Broadway. I would be on Broadway. Who am I kidding? I would be on Broadway. Kristen Chenoweth is living the life that I want. I love you, Kristen. But yeah, she is. Just a moment. You open that window right back up, please. That was my rain. Yes, it's pouring. That's the plan. Open the window. I just got done telling my people how much I love and adore and am grateful for my rain that you just closed out. Now open that window. You're going to find the strength. Motivate yourself. So if my trauma did not happen to me, who would I be? That is a huge, huge question. That is like the core of all questions. Because it gets you thinking back to when you were a child, before you were traumatized, what that looked like. What were you thinking of? What did you envision? What did you feel? What did you want? What did you desire? Because you imagined a dream life. When I want to be when I grow up. And you were writing all of that down. It's all they drilled into us, wasn't it, in high school? God, they shoved that crap down our throat. Who do you want to be when you grow up? And we had to write so many essays and so many articles. And then we had to read them in front of the class, which I loved. Oh, which I loved. I could not wait for my moment to shine. I loved it. So yeah, that's where we are. And it was weird because we're sitting there giving them our vulnerability. We are opening ourselves up, and at 5 years old, telling them, this is my dream. I'm going to tell you a story because that's what I do. I am a storyteller. That is what I do. First and foremost, if I'm not telling a story on stage, I'm telling a story on paper. So I will tell you what I do. I'm going to tell you a story. I remember it was career day. I was 8 years old and it was career day. And they wanted us to show up to school dressed as our dream job. I showed up to work dressed as an actress. Isn't that interesting? I showed up to work dressed as an actress. And my father was pissed. He called me a whore. At 8 years old, he told me I would be a whore. There's actually a myth about that, a legend, a real existing legend. There was a woman, I cannot remember her name, very famous actress back in the 1600s. She was the triple threat. She was an entertainer, and she was a lady who was highly powerful, very powerful. But she was an entertainer, and she was a lady first and foremost. But the men around her felt threatened. So they started a rumor accusing her of whoredom and being promiscuous and slandering her because she was powerful. So they dragged her morals and ethics through the mud, and then they shamed her for their own rumors. So to this day, it is a common misconception among certain types of people that actresses are whores. My father was one of them. So at 8 years old, I had my massive dream, my massive vulnerability. I took my identity and I dressed myself in it. And I stood out on a stage in my imagination and I said, I am going to be an actress. And in that moment of my deepest vulnerability, my father called me a whore before I even knew what sex was. Because actresses are whores, he said. Watch this. Then my little subconscious brain went, if actresses are whore and I'm an actress, therefore I must be a whore. I had already figured out logic by the time I was 8 years old, and it was already running through my brain. In fact, most children have figured out logic very early on because we need logic. So that kind of a proof is always going on in our heads. Children have mastered proofs. Oh yeah, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Oh, they are the master at proofs. That kind of knowledge is conditioned out of you as you grow. So that when you're 15 and you're in math class again, they're trying to cram it back down your throat. And you're like, wait a minute, I had this rejected out of me by abuse. So there's like a disconnect between childhood, our childhood years and logic. But it's a simple proof. I am an actress. All actresses are whores. Therefore, I am a whore. See how that works? But there was another part of the story I want to tell you about. So I showed up. I was crying that morning because my father called me a whore. And this arrogant, pompous Dolores Umbridge of a woman, yes, I had Dolores Umbridge as my teacher in the 8th grade. Dolores Umbridge basically informed me that I was a whore, because that was the common misconception, that actresses were not a good thing. And she literally sat there and evaluated each and every one of us, evaluated us on our ethics. Watch this. So it's career day and all of these kids showed up and we're all wearing our dreams and we're vulnerable and we're standing out going, this is my identity. And this woman, Dolores Umbridge, looked and acted just like her, walked around and evaluated each one of us in the smallest stage of our vulnerability. And then ridiculed us, mocked us. We were 8 years old. Actually, it was a schoolhouse. So we were actually 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Because it was a one-room schoolhouse and we were all in the same grade. So, oh yeah, I grew up in a one-room schoolhouse. That's right. So yeah, she very much in that moment of vulnerability. And I remember this one boy, he was not liked. He was different. Well, I'll tell you how he was different. He wasn't a Christian. That's it. That's it. His parents sent him to parochial school, and we don't know why. He was not a Christian. His parents were atheists, and he was exceptionally more poor than the rest of us. And he belonged, hear me, belonged in the public school because he wasn't a good Christian and he didn't have money. So why was he there? And we couldn't figure this out. And it is now just occurring to me that I was probably raised by a very snobbish, wealthy family in my town. And I didn't even know it because the way my father talked, we were impoverished. Huh, interesting, interesting. So I'll undig that little bucket later. So that being said, I remember this umbrage woman turning to this boy, and he had a problem understanding the assignment, or he truly invented his own ideal career. He showed up to career day dressed as a roller skating clown and stand-up comedian. I think he just wanted to wear roller skates to school, maybe. But he did. He showed up wearing roller skates, dressed kind of as a clown, and he had a microphone as a stand-up comedian. Okay, so now as an adult, where I am in life, I'm going, wow, that's really ingenuine. Like, or what's ingenious? I can't remember the word. It's the word that describes a person who's really creative and inventive. And maybe that was his career job. And I watched Dolores Umbridge turn on this boy. He was younger than me. He was maybe 7. And she put him on the center stage and mocked him. Not only did she mock him, she riled up the entire class and egged us on, pointing fingers at him and laughing at him. This was our teacher, by the way. And I watched this boy just shrivel inside and hold back the tears while 25 of his classmates ridiculed him. I didn't laugh. I did not think it was funny. I saw this boy on the edge of tears, and I felt really bad for him. That we were all told to appear as our identities, our dreams put out on a silver platter, all of us dressed up in our costumes, and then one by one, criticized, ridiculed, called whore, or just put in the center stage, laughed at, mocked by his peers. I don't know what happened to that boy. I don't know where he is today. But I know how much that day changed me. Because that day I took out my identity and I threw it away. And every time I stood on a stage from there on out, I heard the words, "You're a whore," playing into my head. Thanks, Dad. And the thing is, it would not surprise me if every one of us had a story like mine. We are conditioned to hate who we are. We have a lot of players in our lives teaching us to hate who we are. So we're constantly throwing away that identity, constantly tossing it away. And when I went through my psych work and my own mental work and I healed, I said, rule number 1, Anna, rule number 1 of the Healing Garden, rule number 1 of your own life, because you lead by example. You must honor every part of your identity. That is my Anna rule. I must honor every part of my identity. And I have a lot of identity. I have the actress side, and I have the philosopher side, and I have the psychologist side, and I have, well, the BDSM mistress side. And I have a let's go party side, and I have a hippie side, and I have a well, I'm just going to say it, an astrological oracle witch side. And if I don't honor each and every one of these sides, my mental health suffers. In fact, all of us do, because the identity has been taken away by the self. So this is a mission for me to get my identity back. And to do that, I have to put my body on a stage, hence subconscious dialogues. Now, on the flip side of that, I went, okay, so I need a stage. I need an audience. Thank you. Now, what exactly am I going to talk about? And this brings me to the third part of my triadic healing. I have the identity and I have the conscious awareness, and I've got little things happening all over the place with my identity. And this is great for conscious awareness. But here's the problem. How do I explain to you something so simple as the subconscious mind? Simple in my brain. It's really not simple. It's really complicated. But I don't want you to think it's complicated, because then you'll have a misleading belief, and that jams up more of the works. So let's call it simple, because everything that's complicated and abstract can be broken down to simple if you know how to communicate on the right stage. And I do, because of what I learned. And I just went, I understand what I can do. If I present to you in improvised play form everything that takes place in the subconscious mind, I can show you through theatrics what the subconscious mind is doing. Because through story is how we learn. Through theater is how we learn. Through theater, you can learn anything, which is why we love TV so much. You don't believe me? Watch Rick and Morty. Holy shit, that stuff is complex. And it's funny because when I first started watching it, I wasn't as smart as I am now. And watching Rick and Morty, well, I got smarter between point A and point B. And I'm not saying Rick and Morty made me smarter. I'm saying that a lot of variables in place were making me smarter. So that while I'm watching Rick and Morty, there were things that I was not picking up. Also, because of the glory of redundancy, you can pick up things, subtle things, Easter eggs that you didn't pick up in episode 1, that when you go back with the foresight. Watching TV like that is very much perspective shift playing, because you walk in a show and you watch an entire show and you gain one perspective. And now that you have that perspective, you can go back to that show, rewatch it, and gain perspective number 2. And the more you rewatch a show, the more you adjust your perspective to grasp exactly what the author's POV is. And the author's point of view is the ultimate perspective that you want to get to. Because when you figure out what the author is saying, you can look at it through an omniscient point of view and understand. And through understanding, that is when the world starts to open up to us. Through understanding, you can comprehend. You can have empathy. You can attach yourself to patience. All through understanding. But we gain understanding by repeating perspectives, by repeating stories to alter our perspective until we can see the situation as if we were the author themselves. My work, after 30 years, brought me to the author's point of view of the subconscious mind. I'm here. It took a lot of fucking work, but I'm here. I made it to the author's point of view of the subconscious mind. And I'm going, holy shit, everyone needs this information. Everyone needs this information. How do I do it? And I have been racking my brain for a year trying to figure out how to take something like this massive authorial work, and give it to my 15-year-old with ADHD. How do I do it? And I realized theater. I realized it's the stage. I realized that if I break it down to you in my little stand-up comedian way, I will A, tap into the part of me that was so horribly abused out of me. And B, I find a method of communication to break down the subconscious mind into comprehensive parts. Now, I cannot promise you I'm going to be good at acting. That's not the point at all. I am going to be improving, and I'm just going to be my authentic self. And that's all I can be. But my authentic self is very dramatic. That was an abusive word my parents used on me for a very long time. That was their number one gaslight, is that I was dramatic and a whore, reminding me every single day that I chose to be a whore. So that subconsciously, I believed I was a whore. So subconsciously, because I could not divorce the truth that I was an actress, I must be a whore because of that lovely little premise and proof my father presented when I was 8 years old. So I sought out dangerous, horrific behavior because my father could not be wrong. See how that works? Perspective is everything. So that was actually one of the hardest things to work out of my head, is that I was not a slut or I was not a whore. That was a very difficult, misleading belief. So in the name of reviving the identity for me, and in the name of teaching you how to revive your identity for you, and because our lives revolve around story, and because the subconscious mind is so fucking complex and there is so much information, rather than giving you all this information in dry text, rather than giving this information to you in dry article writing, and rather than giving this information to you in elongated, complex podcasts, I decided to try a different medium of theater. So this is the introduction to the subconscious dialogues, where I simply stand on a stage and I tell you in all of my theatrical self-authenticity how exactly the subconscious mind works by presenting it in players and characters and maybe a plot, maybe a subplot. I don't know. This is improv. And I think this is going to be really fun. So thank you very much for joining me, and I will be seeing you shortly. I am Anna Imagination. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also take a look at my newsletter where you can get my daily news. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.